There we go. So I'm recording now, and a couple of quickie things. So first of all, I'm reorganizing things so that when I share my screen, you'll be able to see me and stuff. So and I also want to make sure I'm able to find out if anybody has any more trouble. Hopefully Jen is getting herself here. I expect she will be. Okay, so a couple of things. We'll be meeting like this each week. If you haven't participated in one of these online classes, I'm going to go ahead and record a little guide here while we're talking. So when you're on a live Hangout, if you have a microphone, and Shelley, you don't have a microphone. If you have a microphone, we'll ask you to mute yourself when you're not talking. You're more than welcome to unmute and talk. You'll see Felicia's really used to that. So she'll demonstrate off and on through the class, talking through her microphone. You can also use the chat. I'll type. So this is the chat window. I can't see it because it's behind. There we go. This is the chat window. So if you see a message, pop up and you click it, the chat will show up, and you'll be able to see where to chat. You can also get the chat by waving your pointer over my face. And on one side, I don't know which side, but one side, a group of buttons comes up when you wave your pointer over the Hangout. And the top button on the left side is a blue chat icon, and you can click that, and it will pop the chat up if you haven't got it any other way. Generally, when the first time you use a chat on a Hangout, each Hangout, when you open it thereafter, that chat will be open, I found. So to mute yourself, and it's important to mute yourself. What'll happen if you don't mute yourself, if you're sitting there and you're like eating your potato chips while I'm talking, and the microphone is on, the picture goes to you. So I'll be like demonstrating something on ArcMap, and the picture will be showing you chewing on your, potato chips or whatever, and that's what we'll hear. So, and you might not be aware that it's doing that. So just make sure that when you're on the chat, on the Hangout, that you mute yourself. And to mute yourself, wave your pointer over my face, and then up on the top, a row of buttons appear. So the second button from the left is the microphone button, and if I click it, I'll be muted. Then you can also turn your camera off if you want to. So here, I'll turn my camera off, and you'll see what that looks like. So it's just a pulsing profile picture. Boy, that's an old picture. That cat is like 8 years old now.
That's why I was just thinking that kitten must be long since grown up. You've been at it forever.
It was sitting in my lap this morning. And then there's a fourth button, which is the bandwidth button. It looks like you wave your pointer again, and it's on the top, and it's the third from the right. And it has little bars that look like on your cell phone, to show how many towers you have. And that is the what is it called? Bandwidth button. And you can click that, and if you drag the slider down, it will no longer show me in HD. And as long as you don't pull it down so far that you can't see what I'm doing on the screen, that can help if your internet is getting kind of slow. You can also turn off your camera if your internet is slow, and that helps. Remember, Felicia, you took class in your car, and you had to turn your video off. So you want to remember to do that as well. If you ever have trouble getting online, you can often manage that, or manage to reach me while that's happening by going to the Google Chat. So here I'm on Google Chat, and I can text you guys. Oh, Jen, yay, she's here. Yay.
Hi.
Hi. We can hear you and everything. I'm so glad you made it. Hooray. All right. So, and we can hear you just fine. I don't know if you wanted to show us your lovely face. When you're talking, feel free to unmute yourself and talk to us. You can also use the chat. So the chat is here. You click this message when it comes up on your screen, Jen. You'll get the chat window so you can type anything you want. And if you want to mute yourself, you can wave your pointer over my face and click the mute button, the microphone button in the top row of icons. If you're unmuted and you forget, I actually can just mute you myself. So that works fine too. And okay, so I think that's about it about how to work with these video chats. If you're not joining us, so I think you'll have a lot more fun if you can join us live. I know there is at least one student who's not really going to mostly be able to join us live. So I will be posting, and also when you do assignments, you're going to want to rewatch parts of some of our classes. For instance, pretty soon I'm going to show you how to georeference things. Felicia, I know you're an expert at that. And so you'll want to probably go through the video where I'm going to demonstrate how to georeference stuff. So, so we'll be going over some, sort of technical things. Today, we'll see if we have time. Today, we'll probably, hopefully get a chance to look at some software, some data and software. I want to start out though by, I don't remember which of you needs the software and has it. Felicia, I know I sent you a new code, so you should be all set to continue on till the end of the year. But Jen and Shelley, do you have the software or do you need it?
I got the code from you and I was able to use that.
Excellent. And you got it up and running and it's working?
Oh yeah, I was still trying to log on to Esri. I'd forgotten my password, and oh, I also somehow was having trouble with my security question.
I can't help you with your security question, but you should be able to, okay, great.
Do I need to log on to Esri to be able to do I have to re-download it? I was trying to remember how that worked.
You don't. All you need to do is log on to Esri and activate the license.
Okay.
Yep, and once it's activated, then you can, in fact, I can show you. Let me fire up.
Okay.
I'll fire up my other, it's my virtual machine. Is what I'm firing up here. So I'll show you how to activate your license. This is a good handy thing for you to know anyway. And so what I think I'll do now then, since we're at this juncture, is I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So prep here. So I'm going to get a little thing. I want to make it so that you can see me. It's backwards for some reason, but you'll be able to see me while this is happening there. And I'm firing up Windows so that you guys will be able to see the software. Let's see, my entire screen. There we go. Share. All right. Okay, so we've got the tunnel here. Now, so I'm going to log into Windows. Why are you so big? I told you to be small. I don't know why it is insisting on being big. There we go. Okay. It has to sort of rethink its existence every time I resize the window. Okay, and trust me, it actually is worth using my Mac for me. So just FYI. All right. So let's see, and I think Jennifer, I think you're not muted, so you might want to mute yourself while you're when you're not talking. But if you need to talk or ask a question, feel free to unmute. Okay, is everybody seeing my windows and everything?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what you need to do, so once you go online with that code, just as I've explained in the instructions that I sent you when I sent you your code, once you've done that process, you went online and you went on Esri and you entered the code and activated it. You don't have to, if you've already downloaded the software, you don't need to re-download it, but you can. It does prompt you. Once you get to that point, that code is activated and it will send you an email saying that as well. So once that's done, if you have the software already installed and have already closed the wizard that pops up to license it, you'll need to know how to get back in. Or if you, like you, Felicia, you're going to reactivate an existing license. So you need to go here. So you go to Start, and you can if you depending on which version of Windows you have, you can search for it. Find ArcGIS, and it's ArcGIS Administrator. No, you need ArcMap for now. We might fiddle around with ArcGIS Pro. We messed with it last semester, and honestly, I'm not impressed with it. I'll get to that, Jen. So hang on. I'll show you what to do in terms of what you're activating. So if you don't know where to find ArcGIS Administrator, you can just type ArcGIS, and it's one of those options. So here's ArcGIS Administrator, and it is not obvious in the least what you're supposed to do. So yes, I do want to open it, and it opens a window like this. And so it's not clear at all what you're supposed to do in order to activate your software. So here is the secret. You click on this word over here, desktop. And when you get to desktop, all of these options come available. The version of ArcGIS that you need is this one. It's the ArcInfo version, or advanced single use. So none of the concurrent use ones will work because you need a server license and you don't have that. And if you activate the standard or basic, you'll be missing some functionality. You get the whole shebang. So you get advanced ArcInfo single use. Make sure you do the complete installation, which I believe is now default. That installs all the extensions and so forth, and then go through and click Authorize Now and go through the wizard. I'm not going to do it, but essentially just give it what it wants. I wonder if I can get it to show the whole thing. There it is. So give it what it wants, right? Next and next, and it's going to have you fill this, a form out, see who you are, and then it will prompt you for the license number, and that's where you put it in. You don't need to evaluate. You don't need to evaluate any extensions because they're already going to be activated when you authorize this student license. So the other thing that you'll want to know once you're back in here, if you want to check to see if your license got activated or how long you have on your license, you can go back here where it says desktop, and then under that, availability. And here, this might be a little small on your screen, but you can see all the items, the parts of ArcGIS that are installed and authorized. So installed means it's there, and authorized is there. And so you can see I don't have data interoperability installed, which is another thing that you have to download. We're not going to use it. It's not really relevant to anything that we're doing here, but it is authorized, and lots of other stuff is there. But the key things that I need are desktop advanced. We might mess around with network analyst, but all these analysts should automatically be set up and ready to go for you. And it's those that we're most interested in, really desktop analyst, possibly network, and definitely spatial analyst. So that's how you can tell if it's installed and authorized. All right, any questions about that? And on the website, there is a video that goes through how to install. So there's that information. I think I sent virtually everybody a code. So if you still need a code and I haven't sent it to you, just let me know and I'll send it along with the instructions. Okay, so for right now, that's where I'm going to leave it. I'll just click OK. I think you can't forget if you can. I don't think you can have ArcGIS Administrator open with any of the other applications. I think they have to be closed. So I'll leave this for now, and we're going to go to the web here. So for today, if you go to this week's page, and I'm going to paste the link into the chat, so those of you who are here on the chat Hangout with me will be able to see it. And I'm going to make my screen a little bigger so that I can. I'm going to move you guys down a bit. There we go. And now I can make this a little larger because I'm going to show you some stuff. So if you go to the week 2 page, and I just posted that on our chat, you'll see some things. We already talked about this. So hopefully by next week, you'll have your software installed and ready to go. Or if you're working in the lab at the university, you don't need to worry about that, and you'll be ready to do your tutorials. So this week you had a couple of readings. That was one in the Von Meyer book, which I should have. Oh, I think I have it open elsewhere. So in the Von Meyer book, we're going to talk about some of the key concepts in that reading, and then the main parcel data standards, which are listed right here, and we're going to talk about those. There's some additional links that you'll want as well, and we'll go through each of them as we go. One is a layer for you to download and save to your computer and then unzip. We'll actually get to that last. I probably should have put it last in the list. It was just, I had things open and I just put them on the page. The rest of the stuff, I'm just going to sort of babble and we'll answer questions and throw out ideas and examples that you guys might have. But eventually we'll use some parcel data. Okay, so that said, what we're talking about today, and I don't have my Word open. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to get started with land records. But before we get too far on that, I want to sort of put it in context. So we're talking about, of course, this whole course. Get back there. I'm having trouble today. There we go. This whole course is about what municipalities can do to be more efficient and effective in their management using GIS. So first of all, it probably helps to define what municipal means. Does anybody know what the word municipal means? So municipal, not necessarily parcels, but city. Yep. And municipal doesn't necessarily mean data, but you got the city part, and ownership also isn't included in municipal. It refers specifically to a level of government, a local level of government. And so city and town or township, as we have in Maine, sometimes in the South they're called parishes. are municipal levels of government. So it's local government. And, and so when we talk about using GIS at the municipal, for municipalities, that can be urban or rural. So there's a common misconception that municipal means only cities, but it also means it's really any local level of government. And when we talk about GIS, who would, well, let's see, what sorts of information, and here, Felicia, you get to use some of your answers that weren't quite right on. What kind of mapped information will be useful and needed at the municipal level? And Felicia, now you've got, now we can say you need land ownership, right? And linked to land ownership, what other sort of information might you have? There's all kinds of stuff. Good. So deeds, rights of way. Yep. Assessment. Feel free to chime in, everybody else. So land ownership, good. Excellent. Zoning. Good. And good. Yep. So structures, utilities, and there's a bunch of utilities. Those are really important for towns, and towns often have to, own and run the utilities like sewer and water, etc. There's more. Good. So water supplies.
What exactly are all these words related to?
So these are the kinds of map information
For municipalities, for GIS?
Yes. Okay. Yep. The water supplies. There's also a whole bunch of stuff. Good. There you go. Roads and other transportation stuff. 911. So emergency response addressing. There's good. Yes. Natural features and conservation features. Very important. Culverts, good. Yeah. Another important kind of thing is soils, good. And all the stuff related to soils and ag, and there's waterfront with access, good. Elevation, contours, yes, and on and on and on. So let's see, there was another one, parks, public services. Yeah, pretty much, anybody who's done GIS for any length of time has used a lot of these types of data. Good. Land use and land cover. And so all these different kinds of data help with a whole bunch of different functions that towns have to pursue. So managing, ownership and taxation, right? I don't think I did. Oh yeah, and I did include assessment. Ownership and taxation, planning, promoting economic development, providing public access to public resources, and on and on and on. So there's very little actually that towns do that doesn't involve mapping. So there's a lot of need, like a really very intense need for municipal staff to use GIS and to make maps and use maps in their work. But this class and municipal GIS isn't only for people who do or want to work for towns or cities. So it's actually really useful for people who are gonna, so for instance, if you work for a land trusts use land records data. They participate in conservation planning all the time. They need to adhere to zoning requirements. They coordinate often with, parks departments and provide public access. So land trusts are another group that commonly needs municipal GIS data. So Muni GIS, obviously for municipal staff. I gave the example of land trusts. Who else? Who else would use this kind of data, even if it's not all these types, right? So we have, yeah. So basically, yes, good. Regional planners and a lot. Felicia's been an intern in our lab and has been working a lot on municipal planning work and planning maps. And so basically any GIS consultant, it's probably, it's one of the sort of top 2 or 3 applications of GIS in terms of demand for people. Shelley's got it, yeah, consultants, developers. And actually developers themselves, also we get a lot of people in real estate. Surveyors, we're gonna look at a surveyor. Yep, land use law lawyers will commonly do it. Land use and title. We'll use this kind of data a lot. Civil engineers. Let's see. Yes. Oh, very good. Landscape. I like how you spelled it too. Landscape architect. And don't worry about misspellings. I know you're typing fast. So, so landscape architects, very important group. Also, utility workers. We have some of them are municipal staff, others aren't. There's a pretty strong group of folks working in utilities, both for city government and outside city government, and they go back and forth. There's also transportation workers, asset management. And logistics, people who do logistics often use a bunch of the transportation and network planning data, and that's for public works. Lots and lots of that. So, etc. So you might think, oh, well, I'm not going to work for a town. I don't need municipal GIS, but really, it's a really, really important swath of GIS. In my lab, it's the majority of what we do. So we work with land records data and we work with regional planning data, and we help with zoning decision making. So that's one of the main specialties. So a lot of what we'll use as examples in this class are things that we've actually done here in this lab. And in fact, one of the things that I have constantly got a backlog for is people who are willing to work on parcel maps. I have parcel mapping work right now that towns are waiting to have done, and I don't have people who are trained to do it. So if you're looking for some extra money, there's money just waiting. And so after you even if you're like 2/3 of the way through this class, you'll have pretty much what you need to know to make parcel maps. Okay, so some of these functions are pretty specialized, and so some of the key areas that we're going to work on. We're not going to cover all of this. We'll touch on some, but the main areas that we're going to look at and where we're going to start is land records and land management. So, but primarily land ownership and assessment records and how that's managed in map forms and what the standards are and how you generate parcel data. So land record data is going to be where we'll start. We'll also look at planning maps. And an extension of planning maps will be suitability mapping. A big piece of what we're going to cover this semester, we'll look at cartography and I should say cartographic design for municipal mapping. This is a pet peeve of mine, as you'll see. We'll do a bunch of we'll critique a bunch of bad maps out there. In fact, you'll see some today. I have a few in mind to show you. So there's an enormous amount of really bad municipal mapping going on. Oh yeah, and you wouldn't even believe it. And so there are a few really, really crucial concepts that that are important in making municipal mapping accessible to the public. And there are also issues of accountability that are really important. So it's really important, for instance, to know when you're talking about levels of accuracy and precision and how certain kinds of information are communicated, to know what the standards are there. And then there are some common practices, for instance, using on zoning maps, using 20 or 30 colors, different colors and different symbols to distinguish each of the different zones. That's just not a realistic functional way of mapping. There's literally no physical way a person can use a zoning map like that. So we'll take some of that apart and have some fun looking at it. We're also going to look at low and no cost GIS applications. We'll mess around. So right now, a lot of what we do for our we do GIS for little bitty tiny towns. We have towns that we work with where they have no town office. They keep their tax maps. I don't know if this is still the case, but there was a town when we were digitizing tax maps in 2011 or 10. One of the towns was at that time storing their tax maps in an old non-functional cook stove in someone's kitchen. And that's where they kept their tax maps. So the bar to get them, folks like that, into using GIS.
Hang on, did you just say they kept their maps in an old kitchen stove?
That's right. Yeah, it was an old like wood-fired kitchen stove. And it was just in their kitchen. And so they just opened the oven and put their tax maps in the stove. That's where they kept them.
Nowhere else to keep them, I guess. Oh, dear.
I guess not. I guess not.
Oh, good grief.
Some towns had one copy of 20-year-old tax maps that they had been updating by scribbling on with pencil for years. And you know, if their little rattle trap crappy town office burned down, it would be gone. And recreating those maps would cost tens of thousands of dollars. So one of the things that we've been doing is helping small towns adopt low and no cost GIS applications to do this kind of thing without breaking the bank. And we've had a great success in Washington County. But this is cutting edge. A lot of small communities still don't have access to any GIS services. So we'll talk about some of those. And then the last thing we're going to look at is called scenario building. And I should say scenario building and decision support. So when towns make difficult decisions, which is virtually every decision a town makes these days, when towns make difficult decisions, they need help. And very often their decisions have spatial, spatial things going on. So I'll show you, we'll read about, and I'll show you some different kinds of decision support and scenario analysis that people do, and some that we have done, so that you can look at some of the tools, and we'll show you some tools. I'm trying to decide, there's an old, very aging tool called Community Viz, which is a scenario building tool, which is largely, I don't think people are really using it much anymore. And ArcGIS now has, there's something called Community Analyst, I think it's called. And there are zoning design tools that allow you to sit in a group and say, oh, well, if we did zoning, blah, 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 what would it look like? And how many houses would be in this zone? And so there's some new tools. So I'll explore them. And yes, exactly, Jen. The Orton Family Foundation created Community Viz. And it's still out there, and some people use it. In fact, Judy Colby-George, who was supposed to teach this class instead of me, does still use Community Viz with towns. You know, Community Viz is a really good tool for some applications. One of the problems with Community Viz, and Judy could tell us more about it. One of the problems with Community Viz is that it has it needs data input that we don't often have in really remote rural communities. So some of the rural communities, so for instance, doing a build out analysis is really kind of hard. Build out is when you pretend that it's 20 or 30 or 40 years in the future, and you set up a zoning scenario, and then you put all the possible buildings that could then fit on that land so that you can see what the build out would look like in 20 or 30 years. That is really hard to do with Community Viz in any Washington County town, simply because we don't have much data. We also don't really have zoning in a lot of places, so that's something else as well. But it is still used. It's used in larger places. Has it? Well, it has improved, and it is compatible still with the current version of ArcGIS. I know that just in the last couple of years that Judy Colby-George has used it to support community planning in some southern Maine towns. But I think it's still, the last time I used it, which is a few years ago, it was still very difficult to use. It's very sort of awkward and clunky, but it does give you some superpowers that you don't have easily in other tools. Some of those are now in Community Analyst, and it might even be fun to sort of split you guys up into two groups and have some explore, some scenario building tools, and others explore others. The other really interesting sort of pathway that's going on with Community Viz with scenario building is with climate change. So there's a big effort, and that's something that we've been closely involved in trying to find ways to help rural communities do climate analysis, climate scenario building. And so that's a place that's new since the last time I really taught this class. So those are the topics that we're going to cover in this class. And there's a lot more. So we're not going to do a lot with utilities. You'll have a few more things in your tutorials that will add some additional, skill sets and topics that we won't be covering in class, but these are the primary ones that we'll be using. Sound good? And if, it's just us chickens. There's no set parameters here. So if there's, great. So if there's something that you are really curious about, do let me know. One thing that I'm going to endeavor to get in there, I don't think I mentioned, but this is right up there with the land records. This is including reading deeds and surveys and importing CAD data. So we will be doing that, that stuff. Those are important skills, and they're rare, believe it or not. You'd be surprised. Okay, excellent. So, okay, so let's get started. We're going to talk about land records. And you do hit import, but it's not quite as straightforward as one might hope. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some of the pitfalls that you can run into. Okay, let's see. I have Nancy's book. Here it is. Okay, so in the reading, and whether you've read it already or not, she talks about essentially what the sort of basics of land records and the basic unit of land records is parcels. But remember that, there we go, parcel data model. What she had, there's an illustration I thought she had. Oh, I'm already on chapter 2. Never mind. Okay, we'll come back to that. We're going to talk about the concepts that she's got in the class. So anyway, so land records, there's a number of different types of land records. So what are the forms that you're used to seeing in land records? And you've already thrown some of these out earlier. So where would you see parcels, for instance? So where would we, good. So you have parcel maps, and they're sometimes called tax maps. And we'll look at some of those. And there are other places as well. Who would typically use CAD? So town maps, yep, so zoning maps, for instance, good. Deeds, and deeds are legal records which are recorded and tracked by county officials in Maine at the Registry of Deeds, and we'll take a look at some deeds there. And good, recorded plats, which is really plats, which is typically you find those at the Registry of Deeds.
What are recorded plats?
So a plat map is a plain view, so viewed from above map that essentially it's the lines formed by parcel maps, and so people don't refer to parcel maps anymore much as plat maps, but that was commonly how they were referred to. So boundary surveys, that's right. And we'll take a look at one of those. Good. Development surveys or plans. Yes. So, and boundary surveys, in fact, I'm going to show you the boundary survey from a piece of land we just subdivided and sold a little over half of. So you'll get to see my survey that I just paid for a few months ago. And so that is, and this, by the way, is important. This is done by a surveyor, and it's not required that a surveyor be licensed, but it's a good idea, preferably licensed. And parcel or tax maps are made by a map maker or a GIS technician or consultant. I say consultant here because that's really mostly. Zoning maps might be made by a community or regional planner or a consultant. In this case, a GIS consultant or mapping consultant. Deeds and recorded plats are made essentially by a combination of, actually meant to do it this way, a combination of surveyors and lawyers, and then they're recorded in the Registry of Deeds. And these development surveys are made by surveyors, depending on the situation, engineers, or surveyors, engineers, or landscape architects. Now, it's important to mention who makes these maps, because not even if you're a GIS person, you're likely to use all of these kinds of data, but you're not going to necessarily be the only person, the person who is in charge or should be in charge of these types of data. And we're going to talk about why in a minute. One of the really important things to know about if you're going into mapping with municipal GIS is the boundary between what you do as a trained GIS technician or consultant and what a surveyor or a civil engineer or landscape architect does. So engineers and architects design, surveyors measure and map in high precision and legal, specific legal forms, and then and GIS mappers make the kinds of data that surveyors and engineers and landscape architects produce. We make them visible. So that's our job. And our job is not, unless we are also surveyors, our job is not to go out in the field with a theodolite and, high precision GPS equipment and to make a legally binding survey. Our job is to allow that survey to be viewed in combination with other kinds of data to provide a variety of different kinds of visualization. And maps that we make are typically, not always, they're typically not legal documents unless they're adopted under some legal framework. So for example, when we create zoning maps, we base the zoning maps on an ordinance, and very often those zoning maps are adopted by a town legally. In that case, our maps become a legal document, but we don't purport to make maps. And when I say we, I mean you guys and me. We don't make maps that are exactly, it's not as accurate, and it doesn't need to be, it shouldn't be. And if we did our mapping as accurately as that, it would cost way too much money. Because it would take too much time, and there's no purpose in making a zoning map that is as accurate as a surveyor might make for, conveyance purposes. Conveyance is when you sell or convey, give or sell or transfer land to another person. So surveyors and lawyers determine, where things are, and they legally describe them, both graphically and in words. And our job is to take the information that surveyors and lawyers provide us and translate into visualizations. Okay, so that's the key. Now, so when we make land records, so when in a GIS, when we make land records, we are using the GIS framework, right? So we're typically using parcel maps or creating parcel maps are the sort of the core, and we're adding things often to parcel data. But within parcel data, remember, it's not only about visualizations, right? So we're not only drawing the lines. What else does GIS do? So parcel data includes line work. It's almost often called line work like this. Line work, but what else? What else can we do with parcels? Good. Address. What else? Owner. Exactly. Yep. Buildings, et cetera, et cetera. There's a ton of things we can know about that. Assessment. Good. Yep. Tax assessment. you know, tree growth status, easements. There's like a zillion things that you can know. Rights of way, ROWs, rights of way. There's a whole zillion things you can know about that. So the line work is what we call spatial data. And what do we call the rest of this data? Good. That's attribute data. Good. So and that's another sort of special thing that GIS brings to land record mapping that surveyors do not. It's the ability, it's a combination of things. Like what makes GIS special for and so useful for municipal applications is the combination of using spatial and attribute data together, and the combination of parcel data with other things. So before we started doing GIS mapping for towns here in Washington County, before we digitized their parcel maps and we started making digital versions of and actual GIS versions of their shoreline zoning maps, they had never seen their parcels and their shoreline zoning in one place, right? So GIS made that possible to do and made it really easy, right? So a town that would have spent thousands of dollars to get a map like that now only has to pay a few hundred. So it's hugely an improvement in efficiency. So we have to combine these two things. Now, the state has spatial data standards, and so I had you read them. They were boring, I know, and I'm sorry. But I'd like to, they were important, and you learned things like new words, right? Hopefully, if you've already read them. And yes, and other states have similar parcel data standards. In fact, other states have more in-depth parcel data standards, I think, than Maine. Not I think, I know that some other states are more picky about the status. I helped them you can see it was revised in 2011, and that revision arose out of an R&D project that we had, that we did. So the state contracted with us and said, okay, you guys are, you know, in one of the most rural counties in the state, and we don't have any parcel data from you. You know, Tora and your students, can you figure out a way to make it possible for us to get little towns to, you know, make parcel data? And so we took a couple years and we worked out ways to do it. It worked out to be, I think, something averaged around $800 per town, which is great because it was a small fraction of what it would have cost to do parcel data for the town on their own, and the state paid the money. So the state paid us to digitize their tax parcel maps and provide them to them. And so that's what we did. And so in that, we learned a few lessons about how well the prior version worked, and so we made some changes. But let us look at what these standards are and how they work. So, and in fact, maybe it even makes sense for me to I'll just use them here. So standard one, which is pretty basic, is requires just that the data exist as vector data, so a polygon or a line layer, that's it. And it has to be a single seamless layer and conform to basic spatial standards, which, you know, there's not much there. There's some, what do you call it? Attribute stuff, which we'll look at later. And not only doesn't it have to be particularly good. It can be either in what they call digitizer units or just a made up coordinate system or real world units. So it has to be digital, it has to be vector, lines or polygons, and it has to be seamless, but it doesn't have to be pinned to the actual world. So it doesn't have to
Why
be
would they use a made-up coordinate system? That doesn't sound like it'd be convenient.
It's very inconvenient, but it is, you can take that data and georeference it, right? So if you have,
georeference it,
yeah, and so you can take a whole, vector layer and georeference it. That is a doable thing. And so that is standard level 1. When we did digitizing of tax parcels from Washington and Hancock County towns in 2010 and 11, we did have a couple towns whose original tax maps were so poor that we could not say that it met a standard above level 1. All we could say was it's as close as we could get in real map units, and it is a single digital vector layer, and it has all the right attributes. That's all we could do. Because some of the maps that we had scanned were unspeakable, just ridiculous. So some were made in the 60s and 70s and had just pencil marks on them since. Others were just scribbles that somebody had made. One town of Vanceboro just had a line drawing of the whole town, more or less from memory, and the tax cards in the Rolodex in the town office, and that was their town map. So we couldn't say, yeah, oh yeah, we totally have Vanceboro wired, right? So we just met the minimal standards. Level 2 standard is essentially what we were aiming for in all of the data that we provided was at least at the level 2. And that is all that other stuff, but has to be georeferenced to as many well-defined points as possible on an orthophoto, which we established at that time. An orthophoto meaning a ortho-rectified aerial image, or a vector base that is that meets certain national map standards, which we didn't really have to work with. We used orthophotos that were ortho-rectified. And other well-defined points that we could determine where they were. The Maine Department of Transportation, so state roads and railroad right-of-ways are well-marked and well-surveyed, so we sometimes would use those. But by and large, we used orthophotos to georeference. And that's what I will show you guys how to do in class this semester, so you'll get to know that. And so this is, remember, the accuracy in GIS is how well it matches the real world. We were not out in the real world collecting data here. We were using tax maps and georeferencing them, which you'll see how. Instead, we were matching best available data, and the best available data was primarily orthophotos. So we'll go over how to do that. So this is standard level 2 is what you would primarily have as your standard if you're doing GIS as a consultant without working directly with survey data. Level 3 is more stringent. So it has to be recompiled, so essentially, digitized in a seamless fashion, but it has to fit all coincident features on an orthophoto or a vector base. And that's much more difficult to do. It often requires field checking, or so when I've had to map at this scale, at this level of accuracy, I'll often work directly with, we're about to start a project that will involve surveyors in downtown Machias, for example. And those surveyors, if they're worth their weight, and the cost, actually, if they're worth their cost, they'll be able to tell you precisely where certain features are, and you can use that to georeference. Some of the parcels that we digitized were done from really, really good tax maps that were generated using compiling recent deeds. And so some of that data was at the level 3, but typically not an entire town, only certain property boundaries. And so this is more typical of a survey level. So you would never expect to go to level 2 with a survey. You would expect a minimum of level 3. Yep, so there's also this is something we did run into in our digitizing in back in the day, is where discrepancies between adjacent town lines are more than the accuracy stated above. An attempt must be made to reconcile the difference, and that is the job of surveyors, reconciling the difference of town boundaries. The differences cannot, if the differences cannot be reconciled, and that was the case in a couple of towns that we are still grappling with, then overlaps, gaps, and gores must be separate polygons indicated as being in dispute. And then here, these are high-level surveys or engineering maps. They have to meet level 3, and then they need to be very carefully located in relation to cadastral markers, meaning, what do you call it? Posts and monuments and things that are, and geodetic control points, things that are surveyed or are, yes, an iron pin, exactly. An iron pin on a property boundary that is located very precisely. And you can even go further than that and one of the things, this late in the day I get tired. I don't know if any of you that happens to you. I still have to teach 2 more classes tonight. Or no, 1 more class. This is my 3rd something. Yeah. Anyway. So anyway, one of the things that you do, a COGO, coordinate geometry, is what that stands for, and we'll work with COGO in ArcGIS. So you can actually use information that's measured in the field or from surveys, which itself should be measured in the field, and then you can use those descriptions of the information to digitize the parcels and do that very precisely using ArcGIS or CAD and lots of other, there are a few other applications that are commonly used. So we'll do that with ArcGIS and reference them really precisely to cadastral markers. Now, engineering accuracy can be within millimeters. So commonly, for instance, engineering, it's super common for Department of Transportation, especially when they're working with bridges, working with road grades, a lot of different things like that. Their mapping is really much more accurate than even a typical surveyor would use. All right, any questions? So, and then, of course, there's the spatial data format. Notice that the state, so you need to meet these formats and provide the data to the state. And these are the acceptable formats that the state will accept. They're interoperable, meaning that you can convert one into the other. When we provided this spatial data, you'll see the format that we used. They did limit us to a shapefile in vector format or a geodatabase. We use shapefiles for them. All right. One more thing I want to talk about for the standards that's really important and really crucial, as you'll see soon, for land records data, is this attribute fields. Notice that the fields, the columns in your attribute table are described within an inch of their life. And they're described really, really carefully. And there's, so for instance, there's a map block lot, and how you fill that is determined very specifically. And then there's also metadata that goes along with it. And so I did not mean to open my brother-in-law's email or text message or whatever. I don't know why my computer started sending me Facebook messages when Facebook is closed. I don't know why it's doing that. So I apologize. Hopefully by next week I'll be able to figure it out. And there are really lots and lots and lots of things. So here are tables of the required fields. So as we'll see, there's a feature attribute table, meaning it's attached. It's the attribute table of a shapefile in the case of the data we're looking at. So the state ID field is a character type, and it has a size of 30 characters. Prop loc num is the property location number. So that's like the number on the street, and that's a numeric field with 10 characters and so on. So, and one of them, the map block lot, is common to both. And that allows, so this is a related database, meaning another table, another spreadsheet that we can join to the other one, to the shapefile, and that is based on map block lot. And so we probably won't have time to do that tonight. It would look like, so I guess we're going to do that next time. So, oh my gosh.
Do you think you could have accidentally installed a desktop notification system like what Gmail has?
I think I did. You know what I think it is? It's with my, it's with this stuff, I think, somewhere in my notifications. So I'll figure it out.
Okay.
And we end at 5:20, is that right? How did the time flies when you're having fun with land records? Oh my gosh. All right, so let's just take our last 3 minutes to look at some things. I've got here so this is the Hancock County Planning Commission. Oh, you need a code. Yes, you do. Let me get that right now. Oh my gosh. You're a lifesaver. Thank you. This is what I get. Okay, so I'm going to get you a code. Yeah. Okay, 9465 is the attendance code for today. 9465. Thank you, thank you. Phew, forgot. Normally I keep that front and center. Okay, so I want to have us take a look at one more thing real quick before we go. And I'll send you this link on the chat. This is a handy place. It's Hancock County Planning Commission's land use page. And one really fun thing that they do is when we used their scanner actually to scan all of the parcel maps in Hancock County and Washington County when we were doing that. And what's cool is they took those scans and put them online. I'm gonna get a purposely bad one. Yeah, these are the old maps. So this is Aurora. So Aurora had tax maps. So I want to open one. So here's what it looks like. This is a typical tax map. It has so it was made by Eastern Mapping Service, which is in Newburgh. They're still around, although I don't know if they're closed or closing. They're about to close. The person who ran it is really, really opposed to GIS and doesn't want to learn any new stuff. So it's not, he's not going to keep doing it. But you should notice that there are some common important symbols. Yeah, everything lasts so long. So these actually were only about 10 years old, and Eastern Mapping was still in business when these maps were made. and when we did the updates for them. But what each stern mapping would do is just provide them with a paper map. It didn't provide them with any geospatial data. And so what we did was convert them into geospatial data. So you can see that some of the standard symbols, so you can see the lengths of specific boundaries. These lengths, incidentally, are not map units, are not based on the map. They're based on surveys or deeds. And so the lengths of specific boundaries, boundary segments are listed. Notice that typically a right-of-way rather than a town or state road is shown with a dotted line. Here's a what we call a crosslink. I don't know what I've asked and asked and asked people to tell me what the hell those things are, but they indicate that the property that is on either side of the arrows are part of a single unit. So that means this is lot 31 and this is lot 31. A land hook. Okay, that's as good as anything. So land hooks, crosslinks, something. That's what they called it in New York. Well, that's as good as anything I've heard. And everybody I asked had a different name, but nobody knew a thing. And yes, and that is a river going through. You can see this is not a required symbology, but you can see that it looks like the dotted line is either going through a wetland or going through as an intermittent stream. So it depends on, oh, it looks like the symbol lasts the whole way with the dotted line. A common symbol also is to include wetlands. And it's typical, it's not required, and we don't do this ourselves strictly, but most tax maps are black and white so that they can be easily printed and copied. That's not a legal requirement. For surveys, it is a legal requirement. The surveys must be in black and white. You have no other options, but it does limit your palette in terms of what you can use. We offer the towns an option, and when they have them digitally, it's much easier to print them out. And they are doing far less printing now because of online maps that we have. So we're going to go over how to take an image like this and turn it into digital data. Before we go, I'm going to show you, I don't have this town specifically, but I'll show you a town. Why don't I use Millbridge? So I'll show you a town that where we've digitized their tax parcels, and now we've combined them. Felicia's been, what is going on? The state has been having trouble with their layers lately. So this is an online map of the town of Millbridge. And as you can see, the parcels are all digitized. We digitized them and then have placed them there. They were pretty good maps. So this is a good, strong level 2 accuracy. It doesn't look like much here because of the base map, but if I switch to ortho imagery as the base map, you'll see it's a little better. The roadways are very good. And switch, you can recombine it with lots of things. And probably the best and most important, let's see, let me go back to imagery with labels. One of the best and most important things that we can do is we can, they had, yes, they do. Shoreline zoning. We can add their shoreline zoning, which hopefully will come up momentarily. And there it is. So we can add shoreline zoning. We can make the parcels clickable, and we're able to interact with it. We can even reorder them and so forth. All right, my computer's getting mad at me and tells me I need to go and let you be. I will post this video on our course website today, and And looking forward for next week. You're very welcome. Thank you. Looking forward to next week.
People who attended the lecture have to go enter the code too, or just if you missed the lecture?
Actually, just if you missed the lecture.
Okay.
Yeah, you three will get credit. Yep. All righty. I think that's it. And I will see you guys all next week. You have a little bit of a breather to, get caught up on reading and get started on your Esri tutorials once your software.
Was there a tutorial for this week?
There's no tutorial for this week, but for week 3, which is next week, is when they'll start.
Okay.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.